Welcome to Podcasting by C.J. Bracken, Gonzaga University. In this presentation, we're going to define podcasting, explain some benefits of podcasting, and explain how to create a podcast. So what is podcasting? Well, podcasts are digital media files shared over the web for the delivery of audio and video content to a variety of audiences. In our case, our learners. Podcasting provides you with a voice that can literally reach around the world. A common myth is that you need an iPod to listen or to view a podcast. That's not the case. You can use an iPod, but you can also use an MP3 player. Most cell phones today have MP3 players built into them, or any computer. So what can you use podcasts for? Well, you can use them for recording of face-to-face lectures. The benefit here is that students can listen to a lecture multiple times. They can fast forward and they can rewind and focus in just on the areas that they need extra attention. It allows you flexibility in your class schedule. Here students can listen to the podcast before class and do another activity during the class that builds on the materials from the lecture. Such as in the classes that I use podcasting in, I ask my students to listen to my lecture ahead of time and take a side on a certain issue, and then come to class and be prepared to debate their side of that issue. It allows for increased interaction with the instructor. Instead of the students focusing on note-taking during class, they will have that time where they can take the notes during the podcast, during a pre-class lecture, and they'll be ready to participate in any in-class activity. Vocabulary is one of the biggest reasons to use podcasts. You can use it for terms and definitions as well as pronunciation. Think of foreign language classes here. A college or a department can use it for information to highlight programs, new initiatives, and relevant college events. And you can use it for supplemental faculty-authored content to assist students in understanding difficult subject matter and as subject matter reinforcement. Podcasts are also very beneficial to auditory learners. Online and distance education students who learn best by hearing may learn course content more quickly when they listen to your podcast rather than when they read your lecture content. Latest research has also shown that if we can incorporate audio or audio, video, and text together, that's called multimodal learning, and the students are more likely to retain that information. Audio resources are also great for students with certain disabilities. So what do you need to create a podcast? Well, the first thing is you need a sound card. Relax if you don't know what a sound card is. If you have speakers on your computer and you can listen to sound or error messages, you have a sound card. You also need a microphone. The majority of personal computers, whether desktop or laptop computers, will have some form of microphone built in. And if they don't, they'll certainly have a microphone jack for an external microphone. If you don't yet have a microphone, you can buy one at Office Depot, Best Buy, or even Walmart. A decent quality one will only set you back about $10 to $15. You need some sort of recording software. There are plenty of free audio recording applications available, so please don't run out and buy one. Some multimedia computers may also have some form of audio recording and editing software coming standard. However, what I find the best recording software out there, and it's free, is Audacity. And later on in this presentation, I'll show you where you can get Audacity. And here, at the Virginia Community College system, we also have the Wimba Podcaster built into our Blackboard course site, which is accessible to you and your students for free. You also need a host website. Individual podcasts can be put up on any web page for downloading. However, if you want to provide regular shows, then the use of a purpose-designed host site is required. Again, we have two options for you here within the Virginia Community College system. One is to put your podcast either in Audacity or the Wimba Podcaster and place them in your Blackboard course site. Or we've recently launched iTunes U, which will allow you to put all your podcasts in this one central location, link to it from your Blackboard course site, and your students can then subscribe to that course site, and anytime you put a new podcast out there, it'll automatically be downloaded to the student's computer or their iTunes U, which then in turn can be directly downloaded to their cell phone, their computer, their MP3 player, or their iPod. There's also a lot of free content available, so don't think you have to run out there and start creating hundreds and hundreds of podcasts. You can search Bloglines, Alley, iTunes U, Education Podcast Network, and podcast.net. All allow you free access to a variety of podcasts that have already been created. Before you start creating a podcast, there's also a few pedagogical considerations you need to think about. The first thing is you need to make sure you select appropriate content. Keep in mind that your learner will probably be listening to your podcast while carrying out another task such as walking, sitting on a bus, exercising, jogging, driving in their car. Therefore, it's advisable to avoid dense, complex material. Only provide a limited amount of material in a podcast. And if you want to do your entire lecture like I do, that's fine. But try to break it up in a series of episodes, such as a 50-minute lecture. Try to break that up into 10 5-minute or 5 10-minute series. And for difficult concepts, again, create a series of podcasts here. You also need to determine your instructional goal for each podcast. There are any number of educational goals for which podcasts can be useful. And the particular goal you want to create a podcast for will define the podcast content, design, and the way to use it within your specific course. So when you're thinking about designing your content, listen to other podcasts. Go out there on the World Wide Web and listen to other people's podcasts and see how they sound. See how they created their podcast. Listen to the radio and then think which would be best for your podcast. A monologue, an interview, a dialogue? And what do you want to do? Do you want to present a problem, a challenge, a case story, or a personal experience? Whatever your choice is, keep it short. Try to remember to keep your podcast under 10 minutes in order to retain your students' attention. When you're producing your podcast, don't lecture, don't use a script. Try to be informal, be yourself. Let your passion for your subject really come through. This I can't overstress enough. When podcasting, many times people sit there and listen to their lecture, go back and edit their audio content to make sure it's perfect. That's not what podcasts were designed for. Think about when you're giving your lecture in a face-to-face class. You make a mistake. You backtrack and you fix that mistake. Allow yourself to do the same thing in a podcast. Enunciate. Show your excitement for the subject. It'll keep your students' interest and motivate them to finish the podcast and learn the material. You should also embed your podcast into your course content in your learning activities. Don't make it optional. Anything that's supplemental or optional, you'll know the majority of your students will not look at or listen to. Aim to have at least 50% of your students using the podcasts. And again, we have the Wimba Podcaster, which is already built into your Blackboard course sites, and Audacity, which is a free, easy-to-use audio editor. Here's what Audacity looks like. It works great for both PCs and Macs, and it works the same way. You can find Audacity at the link on your screen. And if you notice the series of buttons, circular buttons at the top of the Audacity screenshot, you'll notice it looks similar to a VCR. You'll have a stop, a play, a pause, a record, a fast forward, and a rewind button. So it's pretty simple to use. So how do you create a podcast? Well, the first thing is you can use Wimbo or Audacity to actually record your podcast. And then if you want to, you can move the audio file into an audio editor, such as Audacity. So if you recorded it in Audacity, you're okay. You can stay there and begin deleting some extra sounds, some silence, maybe somebody slammed a door, you want to get rid of that, you can do that. If you want to add an introduction or an ending, you can do that, such as this podcast was brought to you by J. Sargent Reynolds Community College. Save the file as an MP3 file. Again, Audacity will do that. You can just click on File, Export File as MP3, and then upload it to a website, such as Blackboard or iTunes U. If you have any questions about how to create a podcast or what you can use a podcast for, or you just want to get started, please feel free to contact CJ Bracken, that's myself, and I'll be glad to give you a hand creating this and putting it into any of your course sites.